Ireland is a land known for its stunning landscapes, rich cultural heritage, and a history marked by both unity and division. At the heart of its modern political landscape lies the question, why is Ireland divided? This question touches on centuries of conflict, religious struggles, and opposing national identities. To fully understand this division, we must journey through Ireland's history, starting with the Norman invasion, through the conflicts of the 17th century, and ending with the violent period known as the Troubles, and the peace agreements that followed. The story begins in the late 12th century, when the Normans invaded Ireland under the command of Strongbow, Richard de Clare, Earl of Pembroke. Before this, Ireland consisted of a collection of independent Gaelic kingdoms, each ruled by local chieftains. While there was no unified political structure as we recognize today, these kingdoms shared cultural and linguistic ties. The arrival of the Normans changed everything, bringing Ireland under English crown influence for the first time. However, English control remained weak for centuries, with large areas of Ireland, particularly in the west, still under the rule of Gaelic lords. The real change came during the reign of the Tudor monarchs in the 16th century, particularly under Henry VIII, who sought to consolidate control over Ireland and bring it fully under English rule. This marked the beginning of what is known as the Tudor conquest of Ireland. But it was not just a political conquest, it was also a religious one. The Protestant Reformation was gaining strength in England, and Henry VIII had broken with the Catholic Church, establishing the Church of England with himself as its head. However, Ireland remained firmly Catholic, and the Protestant rulers of England viewed this with suspicion and fear. The Reformation, therefore, intensified existing tensions and led to policies that would reshape the island in ways that still resonate today. To secure control, the English rulers implemented a series of plantations, which involved confiscating land from the native Irish, predominantly Catholic, and redistributing it among Protestant English and Scottish settlers. The most significant of these was the plantation of Ulster in the early 17th century, which took place in the northernmost province of Ireland. This was not a small colonization effort. It was a massive land transfer that saw tens of thousands of Protestant settlers move to Ulster. This act of colonization had profound and lasting consequences. It created a Protestant majority in Ulster, which would eventually become Northern Ireland, and set the stage for centuries of conflict between the Protestant settlers and the native Catholics. These new settlers were loyal to the British Crown and their Protestant faith, and they developed a distinct identity, separate from the Gaelic and Catholic population. This was the beginning of the sectarian division that would plague Ireland for generations. As the 17th century progressed, Ireland became a battleground for wider European conflicts. The Wars of the Three Kingdoms, which included the English Civil War, also engulfed Ireland in violence. The Irish Catholics, who had been dispossessed by the plantations, rebelled in 1641, hoping to regain their lands and rights. This rebellion led to widespread massacres of Protestant settlers, particularly in Ulster, deepening the divisions between the two communities. Then came Oliver Cromwell. In 1649, Cromwell landed in Ireland with his new model army, determined to crush the Irish rebellion and secure the island for the English Parliament. Cromwell's campaign in Ireland was brutal, marked by infamous massacres at Drogheda and Wexford, where thousands of Irish Catholics were killed. His conquest was so devastating that it left a lasting scar on the Irish psyche. And to this day, Cromwell is remembered in Ireland as a figure of cruelty and oppression. The land confiscations that followed were even more extensive than those of the previous plantations, leaving the Catholic population impoverished and disenfranchised. The 18th century saw the continued domination of the Protestant ascendancy, a minority of wealthy landowners who controlled Irish politics and society. Catholics were subjected to a series of penal laws that restricted their rights to own land, practice their religion, or hold public office. This legal framework cemented the division between the two communities, as Catholics were pushed to the margins of society. In the late 18th century, however, the winds of change began to blow. Inspired by the American and French revolutions, the Society of United Irishmen was formed in 1791. aiming to unite Catholics and Protestants in a common cause of independence from British rule. Their hopes culminated in the Irish Rebellion of 1798, which sought to establish an independent Irish republic. The rebellion was brutally suppressed, but it marked the beginning of a more organized nationalist movement in Ireland. The 19th century saw the rise of constitutional nationalism led by figures like Daniel O'Connell, who campaigned for Catholic emancipation and the repeal of the Act of Union, which had merged the Kingdom of Ireland with the Kingdom of Great Britain in 1801. O'Connell's movement achieved some success, particularly with the passage of the Catholic Emancipation Act in 1829, which allowed Catholics to hold public office. However, the broader goal of Home Rule, which would grant Ireland its own parliament within the United Kingdom, remained elusive. The Great Famine of the 1840s was another defining moment in Irish history. The famine, caused by the failure of the potato crop, led to the death of over 1 million people and the emigration of another 1 million. The British government's inadequate response to the crisis further fueled Irish resentment, and the famine became a symbol of British neglect and misrule. In the following decades, the Irish Parliamentary Party, led by Charles Stewart Parnell, continued to push for Home Rule, but the issue was deeply divisive, especially in Ulster. The Protestant population of Ulster, now deeply entrenched in their British identity, saw Home Rule as a threat to their religious and political freedoms. They feared that a Catholic-majority parliament in Dublin would erode their rights and impose Catholic rule. To resist Home Rule, they formed the Ulster Volunteer Force in 1912 and armed themselves for a potential civil war. This division between nationalists, who wanted independence, and unionists, who wanted to remain part of the United Kingdom, would shape the course of Irish history in the 20th century. The outbreak of World War I delayed the implementation of Home Rule, but the Easter Rising of 1916 reawakened the drive for Irish independence. Although the rebellion was crushed, it galvanized nationalist sentiment, and in the following years, the Irish War of Independence, 1919 to 1921, led to the creation of the Irish Free State, a self-governing dominion within the British Commonwealth. However, this victory was incomplete. The Government of Ireland Act of 1920 had already partitioned the island, creating Northern Ireland as a separate entity still under British rule. Partition was meant to be a temporary solution, but it became permanent. Northern Ireland, with its Protestant majority, remained part of the United Kingdom, while the southern counties, predominantly Catholic, became the Irish Free State, later the Republic of Ireland. This division was not just political, it was deeply cultural and religious. In Northern Ireland, the Catholic minority faced systematic discrimination in housing, employment, and voting rights. The Protestant-dominated government sought to maintain control, leading to growing tensions. By the late 1960s, these tensions erupted into what became known as the Troubles. This was a violent 30-year conflict between nationalist groups, primarily Catholic, who wanted Northern Ireland to join the Republic of Ireland, and unionist groups, primarily Protestant, who wanted to remain part of the United Kingdom. Paramilitary groups such as the Irish Republican Army, IRA, carried out a guerrilla campaign against British forces and loyalist militias, leading to bombings, assassinations, and sectarian violence. One of the darkest events of the Troubles was Bloody Sunday. On January 30th, 1972, in the city of Derry, British troops fired on unarmed protesters who were demonstrating against the policy of internment without trial for suspected terrorists. 13 people were killed that day, and a 14th died later from injuries. This event shocked the world and further deepened divisions in Northern Ireland. The brutality of Bloody Sunday not only fueled anger within the nationalist community, but also strengthened support for paramilitary groups like the IRA, escalating the conflict. The conflict claimed more than 3,500 lives and left deep scars on both communities. It wasn't until the Good Friday Agreement of 1998 that peace was finally achieved. This historic agreement established a devolved government for Northern Ireland, where power would be shared between nationalists and unionists. It also recognized the principle of consent, meaning that Northern Ireland would remain part of the United Kingdom as long as the majority of its population wished, but allowed for the possibility of a united Ireland if the people of Northern Ireland voted for it in the future. Today, Ireland remains divided, but the situation is much more peaceful than during the Troubles. However, the scars of history run deep, and the question of Irish unity remains a topic of debate. Brexit has added a new layer of complexity to this issue, as many in Northern Ireland fear the return of a hard border with the Republic of Ireland. The delicate balance between the two communities, forged through centuries of conflict and compromise, remains fragile.